Thank you. Oh, I know we have at least one person, Francesca's going to join us at the second hour. Looks like more people are joining. So perfect.
Peter was tentative based on that state legislative committee hearing. So those are the only people I think I know for sure anything about not coming. So maybe we'll give it like one more minute and then jump in.
That works.
People are having extended Bastille Day of all holidays, I imagine.
I'm a boss, yes, I'm a boss.
Hi, Eileen. All right. Kate, you should just like rotate your backgrounds throughout the meetings to make sure people are, and we can do it then. How many backgrounds did Kate have? Looks like Joffrey's going to be joining a little bit late. And then let's see. Oh, some people are having trouble with the Zoom link. At least. Like at least two people have said the meeting ID is not valid.
Are people having to put in meeting IDs?
Yeah, I didn't have to do that.
I can
I did
send
not
out,
have to put in.
That's weird.
The link in the calendar invite worked fine for me. I'm pasting it in the chat.
Who was it? Do you want me to resend it to the people who are having trouble with it? See if that somehow magically fixes it?
Yeah, the people, John and then Trevor reached out to me.
Okay.
Let me double check I'm not missing any other messages. Yay for technology. That was it. This is when I wish we had like background music or so we had a meeting for work where we had music leading up to the start of the meeting and then during breaks. I really enjoyed it.
We could just sing. Let's all sing.
Everyone sing a different song.
Oh yeah, that'd be really great.
I just resent that to them. Hopefully that will work. Maybe it is 9:06 and we do have pretty packed agenda as usual. So maybe we can just go ahead and at least kick off the beginning and people can hopefully join in as we go through introductions and good news.
That works. Stuart, do you want to get us started with introductions and good news?
That sounds great. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you're all here. It looks like a few still need to join us. With introductions, I think we're getting to know each other, but it certainly doesn't hurt to go around and restate which organization we're from or who we're representing as we get into this. And then we can talk a little bit about, I believe, first thing on our agenda is to talk about the Sustainable Action Committee's meeting. So with that, we're going to do the good news thing. Is that right, Naomi? Okay. Well, I'll start, of course. Stuart Anderson with Transportation Solutions. My good news is I get to go to a conference in Florida, and hopefully there won't be hurricanes. So I'm excited about that, and I'm taking my kids because it's in Orlando and they get to play all day. So I'm going to pass it next to Perry. Perry? Oops, can folks hear me?
We hear you, Perry. Perry, you're up.
Oh gosh, I wonder if she's having, oh,
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay.
Talk, it's your turn to introduce yourself.
Oh, I had a hard time getting in through the link. Sorry about that. Are we answering a special question?
Yes. What's your good news for today and who are you?
My name is Perry Burnett, and oh gosh, I don't even know where to start with who I am, but I'll tell you that my garden is amazing right now. I'm just constantly eating kale and beans and lettuce, and the bees are really happy in my yard. So in the face of an alarming western sky, that keeps me happy.
Pick the next person.
Oh, and the next person, sorry about that. I don't know. Oh gosh, Aileen, have you done
started
that?
if it's helpful, Perry, so you can pick anybody. Except
Oh,
for
okay.
Stuart.
How about Molly?
Good morning, y'all. Molly McKinley, she, her pronouns with the Denver Streets Partnership. My good news is that I am going to see my little brother next week for the first time since pre-pandemic times, and I'm very excited about that. I will go to Trevor.
Hey there, I'm Trevor. I'm an architecture student at CU Denver, and I guess my good news is that my honeysuckles have finally started blooming for the season. I guess I'll go with Alana.
Hi, everyone. Alana Miller, she, her pronouns. I work for the transportation department for Denver. And my good news is that my family lives my dad and stepmom and little brother and sister live in Geneva and haven't seen them in a year and a half. And they made it to the States yesterday. So I get to spend a week with them. And I'll pass it to Ron.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Short, Vice President of Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1001. And my good news for today is next month I'll be taking 2 young ladies to college, one to start her master's and the other one to start her first year of college. And I'll also be going home for the first time because my middle daughter is going to Morgan State University, which is in my hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. And I'll get to go home and eat some blue crabs for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah.
I'll pass it to Adrian.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Ron, congratulations. That's really exciting news. I'm Adrienne Dorsey with Executive Director for Grid Alternatives. No major good news, but I just, last night I had like the quintessential summer evening, which made me very happy. Just sat outside and ate ice cream and enjoyed how green and beautiful it is right now. So yay, summer. With that, I'll pass it to Travis.
Thanks, Adrienne. I'm Travis Madsen. I'm the Transportation Program Director at the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. I live over near Sloan's Lake. And my good news is my daughter learned how to stand up with assistance yesterday. So she's one step closer to getting on a bike or riding the bus. Oh yeah, let me pass it to Chantel.
Thanks, that's cute. Last time we talked, she had just rolled over, so she's making big moves in a
Yeah.
short amount of time.
Yeah.
Chantel Dreamer, I'm a sustainable transportation planner at WSP. Most of my news is also hanging out with my babies, so I'm trying to think of something different. Okay, I got one. I also volunteer on the National Steering Committee at Railvolution, and we've been really busy putting together content for this year's sessions. And we have a lot of really cool proposals this year. I think it's a virtual this year again, and then Miami next year, but I think it's going to be an excellent conference this year, so that's great. And I will pass it to John Hurst.
Thanks, Chantel. Yeah, John Hursty. My big news is also my title. I took a position with the City of Littleton as the Economic Development Manager on Monday, so I'm about a week in. Let's see. Yes, thank you for the claps. Let's see. Can I pass it to Molly, please?
Already gone, but I'll pass it to someone else.
Sorry.
Kate, I don't think you've gone yet.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, I'm Kate Williams with the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, and also with my RTD boss here. And my good news is that I did a presentation on transportation to a group of DU fellows yesterday, and actually did not bore them to death. As a matter of fact, they were so engaged. They asked such really great questions that we ran over the time allotted for the class. So it's always reassuring to know that I'm still somewhat relevant. And I will pass it to, can't pass it to Stuart. Stuart went first already. Who didn't go? Naomi didn't go.
No, I have not. Hi, everyone. Naomi Amaha. I'm with the Denver Foundation, and you're a very happy co-chair of our subcommittee. Last night, I had some friends in town, and I took one of them to Larimer Square, and she just loved it. And it was just really nice to enjoy that space. So I'm just really reminded and thankful of a great place that we have and things that we can show people that don't exist where they live. So that was also a good reminder of me is, we still have lots that we need to work on, but there's so much that we have to share with others in terms of just approaches to making our streets more equitable and people friendly. And I will turn it, Eileen, have you gone? Okay, I'm trying to.
Aileen McCallum, Downtown Partnership, and my good news, if she'll participate, Colby can. It's so strange. Who celebrates that their daughter is coming to work with them? Because there's no summer camp today. But Colby came to work with me for the first time in a long time, over 1.5 years. And she's hanging out below my desk on her tablet and chilling out. And later she's going to go try to request some candy for my coworkers.
And I also helped her make a background.
She helped me make a background on my computer. We're gonna go to lunch downtown later, so that kind of is
bigger computer.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a good mother-daughter morning.
And also next week.
Yes, and next week we're gonna hang out the whole week together.
Without any boys, because
with no boys.
Yeah, because my brother is going to.
Because my husband and my son are going to camp. Okay, now you go back downstairs in your cave.
We believe that greenhouse gas.
Chad, I think you're left. That was awesome. That percussion.
I think, Shad, you're the last one.
Awesome. Good, because I could not keep track of who else had gone, even though I'm the one taking notes. Hey, everybody, Shadendraus from Google. And my good news is I recently took my fiance to Cleveland, where I'm from, and got to introduce her to my extended family and had a really lovely weekend out there. So that was a nice experience.
Great. And Mike, you haven't gone either.
Yes, no, thanks. My good news, since our last meeting, my family and I did a couple week-long vacations, got out of Denver, went camping, 1 week in the mountains in beautiful Colorado. Reminds me of why we live here, and then got to go see my wife's family for a week up in Illinois. So it was the first actual vacations of over a day or two I've taken in a long time. So that was really, really nice. very recharging. So that is my good news. And I think that's the last person. So I don't know, Naomi, Stewart, do you all want to kick it off with the SAC full committee summary?
Yes. So we had our second Sustainability Advisory Council meeting on Monday. And as a reminder, that group consists of each of the 2 co-chairs for the 6 subcommittees, as well as the at-large members. Our agenda, I'm looking at my notes, our agenda focused on every committee just kind of giving an update on where they are in their work. And then Grace gave some updates in relation to the CASR offers, some roles that they're trying to fill, some discussions that they've been having just in relation to what kind of projects should be funded using the climate protection funds. There was also some open discussion, and Stuart would love for you to share what you proposed in that around, what are some immediate ways that the CASR office can spend funding to address, there's like 3 issue areas. Climate vulnerability, so increased heat, decreased air quality, and water scarcity. So it was a short discussion where we proposed some ideas, but we definitely can propose additional ideas and just send those to Grace directly. And one thing that came up as well is I think there's a desire holistically for all the committees to know what each other is working on outside of our bi-monthly meetings. So an email will be going out, I believe the first one in August, just highlighting here's the key work of each committee, here's where there's opportunities to cross collaborate or connect with one another, especially like science and research wants to know what kind of research needs the other committees have. So that email will go out first one in August, and we'll have an opportunity to share some key things we want in terms of information we want other committees to be aware of, as well as just opportunities to maybe invite folks to come present or have discussions. So those are kind of the high touch points. I definitely can share my notes that are a little bit more detailed. I will say there's a lot of variation in how each committee is approaching their work. A lot have been focused, some have been focused on setting norms and just kind of outlining what areas they want to work on. Some are looking to invite speakers from different agencies to brief them on work related to the area that they're overseeing. I think the energy group is canceled their July meeting to join some discussions around a proposed city policy. I think related to Energize Denver, if I'm remembering correctly, but I think the fact that we're centering a lot of our work around, or at least our initial discussions around the task force was really great and kind of stood out, because I don't know that I heard that within the other committees work, but I'll pause there and see if Stuart or Mike want to add anything, and then Stuart would love for you to kind of share what you highlighted around those funding opportunities.
Sure. As Naomi pointed out, I think all of us has recognized that there is overlap between each of these committees and the importance of coordinating with each other. Equally, there is overlap with different city initiatives, and unclear about where we can kind of chime in and help, but certainly a priority to help existing initiatives be successful. The one thing that I noted, and correct me if you saw it differently, Mike and Naomi, but Grace seemed very interested in hearing what recommendations, actionable recommendations we have. And so that was one thing I noted at the end, and she pushed me personally on, what are you looking at? And I could only provide a very vague, high-level response. So I sense that she has a desire to kind of roll up our sleeves and get something done. Mike, what did you see? Anything else?
I mean, yeah, Naomi just put that comment in the chat. That's great. I mean, for us, what can we do right away? I think, both from climate needs to be solved yesterday, but also in the context of the Climate Protection Fund, we want to be finding really great visible projects that we can fund and show some results, because it's year one and we want to make sure we're getting this money out the door. So stuff that's actionable and ready to roll out is stuff that is the best. I don't like to write RFPs, I promise. Stuff I can just move on quickly is so much better. So I'm definitely trying to look for opportunities like that. But other than that, I think that I wouldn't say there's anything else major to touch upon from the meeting.
Great. Well, we'll continue meeting, continue coordinating. One thing I did note is that some of the committees have created subcommittees. I don't know if that's necessary for us, but we'll plod along and recognize that that's one method of moving the group forward. I think the other committees expressed that some of these items you really need to dig into the detail, and perhaps you can't do that within your normal meetings. And so these subgroups were created. But with that, if there aren't any other comments, I'm going to pass it to Alana. She's going to give us the 101 on how we can better utilize or use Slack.
I've got a quick question, and I could get it answered at another time if it doesn't fit in today, but I'm just wondering about the SAC and its consideration of the bylaws and where that is and what happened to the comments we all made. And then the other piece was this idea that there might be a criteria that committees would use to assess the viability and the efficacy of different proposals.
Great question, Perry. So I did consolidate all of our updates and put them in kind of a master document that Grace has and shared those with her. So those are with her right now. It didn't come up on our agenda on Monday, not to say that doesn't mean, I mean, it has to be approved at some point. So I'll circle back with her to see where those are, because I did want to make sure if there was any follow-up questions or things that she, for clarity's purposes, that we're able to react to that in time. And also wanted to be able to talk to any of the other SAC members if they have questions as well, because I'd like that to be an easy approval process. So I'll double check with Grace and let you all know what I hear back around that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Just quickly, Perry, on the criteria we talked about the last meeting, I'm still working on kind of digesting all that and turning it into something new and better that reflects all the comments and feedback we received. So that'll probably be something we talk about maybe at our next meeting.
And I noticed that, Travis, I'm glad you have 2 action items. That's exactly what we're looking for. So we will talk about that later in the agenda. But first step, our 101 on Slack. Alana?
Awesome, thanks, Stuart. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, but basically everyone should have received an invitation to join Slack. If you haven't used it before, Slack is just like a online chat program where you can set up different channels to talk to everybody. You could set up, if there were going to be like subcommittees or anything, you could set up private channels to have those discussions. You can chat with individuals, and you can also upload files and things. I honestly don't know how good it is at file storage. I haven't really used it for that. We can do that, but Aileen's shaking her head. So it might be better for things that we need to be like permanent to keep in Google Drive or SharePoint or something. But for chatting and just having conversation, it's a great tool. So let me share the platform. Okay, so this is what the Slack, if you download the app, this is what Slack will look like. So you can see there's different channels. So this is a general channel. Naomi posted the agenda, and then there's different topics. So if you saw, well, this is about the trainings, but if you saw like a news article or something, or found a good video on equity, you could post it in here. You know, if folks are working on multimodal transportation in particular, or electric vehicles, we've put different topics that might relate to the work that we will be doing. But we can add more. So you can always add a new channel. I think we don't want it to be too overwhelming to not know where things necessarily live, but the channels can be created, and then you can see you can direct message somebody and have conversations. You can also message with multiple people. So Mike, Naomi, and Stuart and I have a little chat going on, and that will allow folks to share content sort of casually, but then also you know, have it in a space. So I'm having a bit of a hard, so you can also search. So let's say that I knew that Naomi had posted the agenda somewhere, but it didn't know where it was. I can search and anything that has ever said about agenda will come up, or whatever it might be. So that's just quick overview. Do folks have questions? I'm also happy to like walk through some people individually. I would encourage you to download the app, and then you'll get a little notice. You can see like I have an unread thing down here. Maybe you can't see that in my search bar. It'll say that I have one unread message, and we'll just help you keep up. So I'll stop. Do folks have questions?
I have a comment. We used Slack really well for the Climate 2A ballot initiative campaign. It can get very chaotic in terms of the channels if there's not a gatekeeper and some definition to each of them. If everybody starts adding channels just like as they feel inspired to, then you never know where to find something, and people stop using it really. So it's a really, I think, really good functional application, but it needs a little more form to the freedom. Like somebody's got to be the keeper of it for it to really work.
Okay, thanks, Perry. That's a good point. So I've put in the channels that I think will be useful. How about if folks think there's something missing, you can just Slack me or email me and suggest that we add something else so that we don't end up with too many different places. And if it seems like nobody's using some of these, then we can delete them as well. But so basically stuff about climate protection fund, vehicles, equity, and then multimodal like walking, biking, and then transit. So those were sort of the topics. But again, if folks think we're missing something, then why don't you come to me?
I have a question about, well, like maybe it's more a concern. Like, I'm not sure how much time I'm going to be able to dedicate to looking at this versus like all the other communication channels that I have to manage as part of my day. So how often are you like folks, are you envisioning folks would be like looking at this and responding to things?
I think that's up to you all. Folks had expressed interest in having a place to have conversations. So I think that we can make it so there's not an expectation that you have to be checking Slack. But if you want to be sharing information or, having side conversations and really engaging outside of these meetings, then that would be the place to do it. But yeah, I mean, I really defer to you all. It's meant to be a tool, but also understand that we all have a million other platforms that we're expected to use and a lot of other commitments for our time. So.
Okay, thank you.
So how about like anything that is critical will also come via email, so that you don't miss any like things that you have to review or have to do. But then it can also be shared here. And for folks who are super interested in continuing to engage, then this is a platform to do that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Well, great. I'm going to move on to the next item. And I do know that my colleague Naomi has attended a training. And so let me turn it over to Naomi to talk a little bit about the training. Then move into the
just raise a hand, it's been offered. Okay, so Molly, Alana, Kate, that's great. I just wanted to carve out some space for those that have participated to just talk through any learnings in relation to how we want to center our work in equity. This training was similar to a training that the Climate Task Force members received, where it was kind of an overview of terminology. So what is privilege, what is oppression, but we really talked about the 4 I's of oppression. And I can put some links in the chat that'll reference those, but we wanted to just really, I think, deepen people's understanding of these concepts as we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and what that means. And then our group went through one case study looking at a current issue related to Suncor and some news around, there's really just looking at an article and talking about where are we seeing individualized oppression versus institutional, and just having a discussion on how can we identify when a question is showing up and use what we're seeing to better identify, as we're thinking about either policy or program solutions, how to make sure that those that we are elevating are actually addressing oppression and structures of institutional racism. So for me, that was a good reminder. And one of the things the trainer is supposed to share are some tools and resources we might use to help in evaluating our work. So those were kind of my key takeaways, but I welcome others that participated to share either in the chat or come off mute, anything they took away. But for me, it was just a good reminder that we need to have some type of a mechanism to make sure we're evaluating our work in that.
Naomi, I might have, oh, sorry, Kate, you have your hand up.
It's okay, Molly, go ahead. I can wait till you're done.
I don't remember if I showed it with you, Naomi, but I kind of rave about it all the time. And it's really simple. The RTD Accountability Committee has created an equity screen that they use for all of their policy recommendations. And it's a few questions, but for everything they do, they have to articulate answers to these questions. And I think it's been a really valuable tool, and it's kind of falls in that category of things that are easy enough to use all the time and still really meaningful. So I'll find, I can find the document of the questions and share them, but there might be something that we could create that's similar, maybe based on more of what was covered in those trainings, or is just more generally applicable to our work, but something so that we have it for every policy recommendation that we make moving forward.
I'm going to send out an article that I thought was really good. It's a new paper that came out in April of this year that talks about transportation equity. And if nothing else, it covers everything. So, you know, it's interesting, you know, the terms vertical and horizontal as it applies to equity. I understand it now, having read that paper. So I'm going to share that with you. I'll also put it in the Google Docs. And then there was a question about, Naomi, are there documents that could be shared from the training you attended?
Yes, and it looks like Alana's going to help capture all of those, and we'll add those to the drive.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Anything more on the trainings?
So I went, it's maybe the 6th equity, inclusion and diversity training that I've been to in the last 6 weeks. And it was well done because it was participatory. And some of the ones that I have been to were not. They were just a lecture format. And so I appreciated the fact that this one had a lot of room for people to interact, and it personalized it. So I wanted to express that I was appreciative of that. And then I want everybody to know, in keeping with Molly, that RTD is just getting ready to start a fair equity program that is going to be long and involved and complex, that we might want to pay some attention to, just because it's relevant, Stuart, to what you're talking about as well. A lot of talk about what kind of equity RTD needs to pay attention to. So that's all I got.
I have a question.
Great. Naomi, did you have anything else under the short term? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I wasn't able to attend the training and just wanted to ask if any additional trainings will be planned. And if not, is there, like, could we set aside time in a future agenda to discuss some of the materials? I know, Lana, you'll be sending out materials, and just to kind of debrief from those who did attend the trainings, and then share some thoughts and questions for those who weren't able to and maybe read through the materials.
Yeah, so we're going to be having some follow-up conversations that'll be open for folks who were able to or not attend the trainings, just as sort of a more open space to think about how to apply equity to this work. So those will also be across subcommittees with different members, and sort of interdisciplinary look at what it means to apply equity to policy and programs for the government. So I hope that folks can attend those. We'll have a couple sessions that people can choose from. And then Grace is interested in having these trainings every year. So that would be another opportunity.
Great. Any other questions?
I just had one thought that might be helpful to us, and it relates to Adrian's asking for kind of a debrief. I thought it was a really good session. I thought the trainer, was her name Candace, was awesome, even given some wonkiness with the technology that was being used for that. She really had a great way about her. She used a case study that I find the idea of using a case study to apply a new construct extremely helpful. However, she used one about a state piece of legislation heading its way to Polis's desk, which ended up, I think, channeling the conversation into a political realm rather than to how do we do it? What do we change? I would love to see her come to our committee, have us pick something we're considering, and then run it through that rubric. Because I think it will end up directing the conversation in a less big picture political kind of unlearning way into okay, how do we do this better? I thought she was great. I just wished it had been a more city relevant case study.
That's really good feedback, Harry. That's something maybe we can take back and figure out, because it sounds like Candace, and I think I have her last name written somewhere because I got her email address, but so I'll look for it. But it sounds like she wants to be helpful to resource. I'm not sure what her contract entails with the city, but we could definitely look into, is there any follow-up for
Yeah, we had
consultation?
hired her as part of a grant through the Climate Challenge, which is the grant that I'm with the city as well. So that is up. I'm sure that Grace would be interested in hiring her for other, like she said, to do annually. I don't know about the ability to hire her for more one-off, but I can mention that to Grace that there's interest in that.
Thank you. Any
So-
other? Oh, go ahead.
Namely, I wasn't clear if you wanted in the agenda for where we're talking about short-term, do we want actionable items that are short-term here, or are we going to leave that to the end?
You know, I think we're making good time. So if you're thinking about Travis's updates, I feel like we could move that up because we still have a good amount of time to go through the task force's recommendations. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I think, well, at least maybe get them named, and everybody who has ideas that are short-term natured, we can kind of get them on the board and then maybe discuss them in greater detail towards the end based on timing. But I am anxious to hear what Travis has and any others who have ideas that are of a short-term nature.
Got it. And that would be good for us to give feedback to Grace, given her ask on Monday. So.
Travis, it's you.
All right. All right. So there's two things on my radar where I think we could weigh in as a committee that in ways that would help Denver achieve its climate goals and transportation. The first one is, so the legislative session, the legislature passed and the governor signed a transportation funding bill that creates about $730 million new dollars for transportation electrification programs. It's divided up amongst 3 or I guess 4 new government enterprises. So before we had the high performance transportation enterprise that was doing stuff like building US 36. This bill creates new ones. There's one about electrifying fleets. There's one about increasing community access to electric vehicles. There's another one about electrifying transit. And then the fourth one's not directly about EVs, but it's about doing projects within the ozone non-attainment region, which includes Denver and surrounding parts of the metro. So 4 new enterprises. The governor needs people to serve on the board of directors of each of these enterprises. There's, I think I counted 6 slots that are specifically reserved for representatives of disadvantaged communities. And then there's a variety of other positions that are kind of spelled out in legislation. So I was thinking it might be useful for us to reach out to the networks that we represent as members of this committee to attempt to identify some folks who might be interested in serving on one of these boards. And you know, depending on how comfortable or experienced they are with this sort of thing, like, you know, if they're not totally sure about whether they're prepared to do this, like I'd offer my assistance in helping to train them, so that they'd feel comfortable serving in a role like this. I think I'm pretty sure they're volunteer positions, which is a complicating issue on the equity front. So I'm not really sure what to do about that. I think legally you can't pay people to do this. So it'd be a volunteer thing. But the timeline for this is the application's open now. I think the governor's team is going to be doing interviews over the next couple of months and making appointments in October-ish. So that's something that we could help with right away. I'll stop that there, I guess, and see if there's any questions or discussion about that before I talk about the other one.
Stuart, you're on mute.
Sorry, Stuart, you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know, Travis. I'm trying to send it to you right now by text, but if not, I'll get it to you some other way. But it describes what each of these groups are. Don't know if that helps. It's kind of out of format if you look to the chat section.
Travis, you mentioned that there's a complication with equity because it's a volunteer board. Is it because these come with just kind of a high time commitment and you're kind of in a tough spot of getting people either during working hours, or what's the complication, just for a better understanding?
That's exactly it. It's, you know, if it's cutting into people's responsibilities and they're not being compensated for their time, it just makes it harder. It's just harder to do, especially when you're trying to recruit folks that are specifically representing disadvantaged communities. So, I mean, if anyone has thoughts about ways we could deal with that problem, I like, that's something I think is worth thinking through. In the context of the equity stuff we were just discussing.
I'm not saying this to necessarily volunteer Denver Streets Partnership for this, but like I'm just thinking about, is there a way that like an organization could sponsor someone with a stipend to participate in an opportunity like this?
So I'm not a lawyer, so let me caveat that.
Yeah.
I don't think you could sponsor someone to be on the board.
That's
I
fair.
do think you could hire them to do something related that's a side activity. But I see Eileen's raising her hand.
Can you, I mean, I know this doesn't address all of the concerns, but could you offer food at the meeting? So like if it's at dinner time, you can bring in dinner so that at least dinner's covered. Yes, or childcare. That's exactly my next suggestion. So childcare would be huge. I mean, I actually think that's one of the biggest challenges for participating. Obviously that only covers parents, but people with kids, but I don't know, maybe offer dog walking services to people with dogs. I don't know, but like getting creative with what do people need help with to be able to participate in these programs that isn't monetary.
Yeah, I think
we need to check the state law because it will be interpreted as a potential bribe or influencing a political decision maker. There's a rule against it at the state level. I'm not sure about reimbursing for childcare expenses, but you know, much beyond that could be considered.
I'm not talking about reimbursing.
Okay.
Even though I think the challenge may still exist that you're talking about, but I was thinking about offering childcare during that time period.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, I mean, maybe you can say, if you're offering the childcare during the meeting, particularly if they're open to the public, then you could also say the people from the community that are engaging in the meeting to listen could also take advantage of that childcare option as well. And that maybe that diffuses that concern of, you know, the benefit of participating in the program.
Okay, so maybe that's another short-term action for us to at least think about, like what could the city or the sustainability arm of the city do to make it easier for residents of disadvantaged parts of the city to participate in activities like this. So I guess part of that is thinking about how like, are there resources we could use for that? And then second, I think, is a legal question that I am not equipped to answer. Like, what's the boundary for what's acceptable and what isn't?
Great. I think that's a really good topic. It would be great for us to have people on these committees. I'll send out the full document. I can't get it into the chat, but you'll be able to see what the various committees are and what types of people they're looking for under each.
And then I guess the reason people might want to do it is because I think there's a big potential for these enterprises to accelerate the deployment of vehicles that reduce air pollution in their communities. It's specifically, at least the three, the fleet electrification, the transit electrification, and the community access enterprise. Those are all going to be about electric vehicles. The non-attainment fund could be about more stuff, like that could include biking and walking and things like that. So the pool of petite people that we could recruit for that one might be a little bit larger.
Travis, so we make sure to send all the documents and everything people might need to know about the positions. Is it okay to have you as a point of contact, or who would you like to us individuals to send people to if they're interested or have more questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to be the point of contact. I'll put my email here in the chat. Like if you identify people who are interested, I'm happy to talk to them. And I can walk them through how to fill out an application. There's an online process, and I can help with the questions that might come up during that. I can talk to them more about like what specifically the enterprises are meant to do. So I'm happy to help with that.
Thank you, Travis. That will be very helpful. And hopefully we can find folks from various factions that they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I could find a bunch of usual suspects, but I think that we should set a higher bar here, especially for the slots reserved for the disadvantaged community reps.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there's going to be a bunch of folks from like the natural gas industry trying to apply to the truck electrification one, and I'd rather have our electrification people in higher number.
I know from a previous conversation that the concern was that it'll be hard to find some of these folks and to communicate and get them to apply. And so I think our role will be particularly important in finding people and helping them through that process so that they can be a candidate.
Totally.
Travis, did you have a second item?
Yeah. So there's a rulemaking that the Department of Transportation initiated yesterday around setting budgets for greenhouse gas pollution in transportation planning that would apply to CDOT across the state as a whole, and it would apply to the biggest metropolitan planning organizations, so DRCOG for us here in Denver. The idea would be that planners need to think about climate when they're making decisions about how to invest money, and show the Transportation Commission at CDOT that their plans are in alignment with this rule, and hopefully in alignment with Colorado's overall climate action goals set in House Bill 1912 61, I think it is. I might have gotten the number wrong. Anyway, that rulemaking was just authorized by the Transportation Commission yesterday. There's going to be, I think the draft rule will be noticed for hearing. I'm expecting sometime in mid-August. The formal hearing at the Transportation Commission is going to be in mid-September, and the final vote at the Transportation Commission will be in October. And I was hoping to discuss amongst this group about you know, what role we might play as a subcommittee and I had a couple of ideas for things that I'd like to suggest that we consider doing. Well, I think it's important for us to engage, because from what I'm hearing so far is that the MPOs are not happy about this concept, and they want to have a weak rule that has small goals and no enforcement, that doesn't really have teeth to affect what they're doing in terms of investing transportation dollars. But I think it'd be important for like us to show up and articulate how a strong rule could help Denver achieve all of the goals that are laid out in the climate task force action plan, and you know, in Denver Moves, other city documents that describe like what kind of a city we're trying to build. And the state rule is important because it's going to affect how state transportation are allocated on properties that are in Denver, like I-25, I-70, the arterials like Colfax and Federal. And it'll affect how CDOT like uses things like Burnham Yard, which they've just purchased. You know, that could be a property that we could use for a whole bunch of things that would reduce climate pollution, or we could use it to expand the highway. So this rule is going to affect all that. So I think it's important for, I know the city is going to engage. Maybe Alana can tell a little bit more about that, but maybe we could weigh in as a subcommittee or issue a recommendation to the SAC as a whole to weigh in with a resolution that we could file with CDOT as part of the hearing. Did I explain that well enough?
I can give you a concrete example. CDOT's going to move forward first with incorporating transportation demand management into interchange projects. And I think the first in the city and county of Denver is going to be the interchange at Lincoln and I-25. And so that will require for the first time that they look at it, have somewhat of a multimodal focus on this. And they also are going to be tied to that funding the TMAs with some additional dollars to be parts of these studies to ensure that they understand how TDM and an interchange plan can actually work together.
Yeah, so that rule exists already. This would be on top of that and would amplify the kinds of effects we could see on directing more funding ideally towards sidewalks, biking, transit, and just kind of designing the city around giving people options to get around that don't always have to be driving.
There's a lot of local attention to what's going on at Burnham Yard. I went to the Denver Urban Exploration, Eileen, and they took a group of people there where David Kretzinger was there and some people from CDOT, and they talked about the future of Burnham Yard, which should very much be of interest to us. I don't know if you guys know this, but you cannot bring a train into the south end of Union Station because somebody before my day sold that land to a developer and their buildings there. So any passenger rail that runs along the Front Range will go through Burnham Park, Burnham Yard there, and then there will have to be a transfer there to RTD to connect to the Union Station and then to the airport. So there's a lot that will be going on there that this group should very much be aware of and should weigh in on. Thanks, Travis. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring us too far away from what we're talking about today, but when we talk about specific ways to impact policy through transport or sustainability through transportation, the Burnham Yards project to me stands out as a huge opportunity or a big challenge because of the potential tremendous increase in highway, the highway expansion component part of that. On the flip side, if I think that my understanding is that project is still, details are still being finalized, but the decisions are being made now. And, if it's a realignment of I-25 versus an expansion of I-25, that's a really different project than an expansion of I-25. And there's a lot more environmental impacts. And
So this,
like that's a defining moment, as the I-70 project was.
I agree with you. And this rule would apply a climate lens to that decision. If we do a good job at demonstrating support for a meaningful rule, which I think the more entities that are doing that, particularly local governments, the more likely it is that we'll get something meaningful that will actually guide that decision in a more positive way for the city's climate.
So I certainly valued the discussion on all of the factors for consideration here, but tactically, it sounds like what you're recommending, Travis, is that we, as the committee, submit a letter in support and state kind of the level. Sorry if I'm trying to paraphrase this. The details that we would want to be taken into consideration and kind of make this a more stronger enforcement and measurement process, and and then this committee would vote, and ideally the broader SAC committee would. Either it would come from this subcommittee or ideally from the broader SAC council. Is that the direction you're advocating for?
I mean, I think that would make a difference. I think, I'd also love to hear from Alana what the city is planning to do here. Because it's weird. It's like we were going to be doing this at the Air Quality Control Commission, and it moved to the Transportation Commission. For some arcane legal reasons. But the process of doing a rulemaking at the Transportation Commission is not quite as formal as the AQCC. So it's a little bit.
So the city, the city will be engaging from Department of Transportation and Public Health and Environment, which from an air pollution perspective, and CASR as well. As Travis said, the process at CDOT is less formal, so any of you or your organizations could engage in that. I think that engagement is outside of the scope of this the charge of this group as an entity. So I would advocate that if folks are interested in that, use this as a place to make those connections, figure out who would be interested in commenting at those state sessions for CDOT, and run with that. I think there's enough on the plate, and to Stuart's plate to comment about Grace asking like, what are we doing? Like the city has a lot that we need help with and recommendations. So I don't want to get too far down like using this committee to try to influence a state process. So I would support you and as individuals, or you as your organizations coordinating to do that. But I don't know about actually using this body.
What about advising the city on what to say?
Sure, you're welcome to do that. I mean, I've been working with SWEEP specifically, and welcome the feedback. I just don't know if like there's added value for the whole group to have to come to consensus on this. If there are particular people who are interested or expertise like you and SWEEP have. I just don't want to take up too much time like going down rabbit holes of formally advising the city when you have my ear and attention already. So just that's my thought.
Okay.
Alana, let me just add, the city's very strict about taking any position, and this is a committee of the city. And Greg Thomas is the only person at the city who can make a decision with regard to an advocacy issue. So if we want to take a role,
we're engaging as a stakeholder in the process.
As a city, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen the draft rule yet, but it probably is worth a more detailed conversation about about maybe not here, but about like the specific items that I think are of concern, which are the stringency, the enforcement provisions, and then also like how CDOT's actually going to measure the climate impacts of projects and prioritize investments.
I have a question for Travis. Part of this is informed by my ignorance about the details of that bill that was passed and the money. Is that funding for electrification flowing annually, 730 million annually, or is that a one-time infusion?
It's going to accumulate over 10 years.
So just having applied for original bike sharing money to the feds, having to have it flow through CDOT into the city and then contracts with city attorney's office, accessing any of that money takes 2 years maybe. So it seems like an immediate actionable item might be to look at what's in our task force recommendations that might be eligible for those funds, and to start putting in place how we can pull them into Denver, because I think the Climate Protection Fund is just not big enough for big transportation projects. And when there are federal or state opportunities to pull money in, it would be good to go after those.
I mean, yeah, 100%. I would add like Excel's transportation electrification plan dollars. Like we could probably put little tiny bits of the city 2A money in and get a lot more from other places.
Exactly, yeah. I love that.
That's a great idea. I'm going to add one item to our short-term list. US 36 added some bike cages at RTD stations with tremendous success. Many of our rail stations have nothing. Well, they do have things, but they're not really where you'd want to leave your bike. But there is a tremendous need to replicate that throughout Denver and to add these bike storage units at rail stations right there next to the platform. They cost, according to RTD, currently $150,000 for everything. It is something that RTD has to construct, but has no money to do these things. There's one funding source regionally for this, but really you can maybe get funding for 1 or 2 of these bike cages in each call that come every 2 years. So it's going to be a very slow process. I recommend to this committee that we consider issuing an RFP for creating secure bike storage cages or whatever style you have at any of the bus or rail stations, bus being more of the enhanced bus type spot. And then to allow entities to go out and to seek funding to do this. And that could be any type of community group that might apply for this. And then the city just writes the check to RTD, and then it enters the process, and RTD is doing an absolutely fantastic job in this realm. I just wanted to call that out. I think that would be a very good use of our funds, and for us to look at the stations where there will be a need would be a great way to do it.
I have a question. Mike has a question too.
Go ahead, Eileen.
Okay. Stuart, I may have misunderstood something you said. Is there a reason why the city can't just be like, we're going to pay for these and then write the check directly to RTD? You mentioned something about an RFP process, and I got a little confused at that. Like, is there a reason why we'd add that layer of bureaucracy? I mean, that sounded negative. I didn't mean to say it that way.
There's no pot at the city for this. I've tried and tried and tried again. There is not. So we don't want to take the responsibility of implementing something. We really are set up to provide funding opportunities. And so if you had a group like Groundwork Denver, they work very closely with communities. If they're at a station area and they see a particular need, that they could make that application for that particular station. Or, you know, any other
where's the money
entity.
coming from? Sorry, I think that's where I must be
From
missing.
us.
The Climate Protection Fund, I think, is what Stuart is proposing as our project that we fund.
So why can't the Climate Protection Fund just pay directly to RTD? That's what I was That's what I thought you were talking about, the money. So is there a reason why it has to go to Groundwork Denver? Like, why can't this Climate Protection Fund, i.e. the city, just pay RTD for the bike box?
Well, it's a little bit complicated. RTD expects to have somebody who commits to the maintenance of that. And right now, thanks to the efforts of Councilmember Black, the city will not pay for anything related to that maintenance currently under its format. And so literally, Councilmember Black actually maintains a particular bus stop that won't be maintained. She collects the garbage and other things that are there. It's a big hole in our system and we need to fix this, but we need a local partner who's willing to take a degree of ownership over its maintenance over time. Chantel?
Oh, I want to make sure, Chantel and Molly, are your questions in relation to this idea or what we were talking about before? Okay. Because we kind of jumped a little and I want to make sure we close that out. So maybe we'll address your two questions and we'll put a pin in what you've proposed if that works and then just close that out. Okay. Great. Go ahead, Chantel.
Chantel?
I think Mike's been waiting also.
Oh,
Chantel,
Mike.
you're on mute.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
No, go ahead, Mike. Mine was an addition to a short-term project. So
Okay.
if anybody has questions regarding Stewart pitch.
I was just going to say that there's different ways how we get the money out. There's lots of administrative details we don't need to talk through on this call. It could be, we go through an RFP of some kind. I love the idea, Stuart. It sounds great. Maybe I would love to maybe dive in, maybe offline with you and anyone else who's interested in talking more about that, on what that RFP would look like, those different partners we want to engage with ahead of time before doing it. But I think, to me, it sounds like a great idea and obviously something that we need at these stations. And so, yeah, I would love to talk offline and maybe anyone else who's interested in kind of digging into the details of this deeper and trying to figure out how we could move forward and what the mechanism to get funding to RTD / the community partners. I'd love to start working to figure that out. Assuming, I don't know, everyone likes the idea, I don't know. I love the idea, but I want to hear other people, if they think it's something worth trying to move forward to. I'd love to hear those thoughts too.
Molly?
My question is maybe more of a process question, and it also might kind of dovetail with the next section of our agenda, but I like the idea of funding that, and I'm certainly not opposed to it, but I guess I'm curious of I'm just a little bit uncomfortable doing things sort of one off. I would love for us to take a look at the bigger picture of what are our funding priorities as a group for this year or the next however many years, and just kind of establish a better a process for that, unless there is one and I've missed it.
I agree, but we talk these things to death. So let's move to actionable items as quickly as we can and get comfortable. It is a thing that is called out in the previous report that Naomi will be talking about later, but we need to get to action at some point.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I would like to have a conversation about all of our priorities and thinking about them as a big picture, and then moving forward with prioritizing them.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Molly. And I think too, as much as we all want to see action on issues too, like the 36 example, that's great in terms of it's working there. But if we're looking at other sites, we want to make sure that it'll be equally successful, and what kind of community engagement might be needed to do so. So like maybe we can talk through just a way to prioritize after we have a better sense of what all of the recommendations could be, and then thinking about that equity lens too, like who do we need to be talking to make sure that the application of this will actually be used. So, but I think we can do that. That doesn't need to take 6 months. It could happen as we need so that we can make recommendations pretty quickly to the climate office so that they can take those steps. So I just, as much as I would also want to see action, I want to make sure we're not engaging the people that will actually be using the resources that we're proposing.
I agree, but there has to be a fast timeline. I'm kind of getting bored now that we're in our fourth meeting and we have nothing substantive to dig into. And so, you know, the e-bikes was a one-off and it's in the plan. This is in the plan too. And the preceding group talked these things through. We're here to implement.
Stuart, question for you. Is the decision to
Yeah, we
move forward
can,
with an is the decision to move forward with an RFP just to get better information as to what this would cost, that such that we would subsequently make a decision? Or is an RFP a step towards actually agreeing to that, to a commitment to some of that funding? Because if you're asking for more information, I don't disagree. I think we should be moving forward with getting the details we need to make decisions. And if that's the first step, then I would readily sign on and say that's our recommendation for today. Let's start that process. If it's about actually committing funding or making the recommendation, I see Naomi's point and I see Molly's point of like, this is the first one that we're moving forward on. It definitely does feel like we're ripping the Band-Aid a little bit on it. I think we should be, but what other things do we need as a committee need to do to be comfortable and then start doing more of that? So I agree with both sides of that discussion.
I agree. That makes total sense.
and you know, sorry. We went through this equity training, kind of talking about evaluating projects. I could see something like this applying here, where we just get these ideas on the table and then run them through an evaluation metric using these core principles that we talked about before actually deciding to make a solid recommendation, but then things can be happening quickly and simultaneously.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Okay, I have some ideas if nobody else has any input or questions. All right,
I have
awesome.
input.
So regarding the
I
fleet
have thoughts, but
electrification and leveraging that funding. Okay, please.
Oh, sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay. I will add my
No,
thoughts
I don't want to
afterwards.
cut you off, Shad.
Just a reflection on something I've done recently. When I was tasked with brainstorming kind of like a several $100 million expenditure that I'm working on, we started with the list, and that it was we need to go opportunity size these initiatives, which I think is the direction I thought we would be going here. Here are a list of 72 initiatives. Here's their potential impact. It's high level sizing. In some cases, we don't have the numbers, and so that's where scenarios like putting out RFPs or looking for more research were necessary. But that was my starting point. And so rather than do the one-offs, I would think that if we go through the task force recommendations, that may be a good, it's a thought and approach. It may not be the best approach. It's just one option. But if we as a group were to say, let's go through these and start sizing these so that we can do some of this prioritization, incorporate the equity elements and the potential GHG or other climate metric improvements, that to me would be like, all right, now we have our list. And now we need to figure out, okay, which ones should we be tackling? Just a different way of thinking of it based on adjacent experiences that I've had.
I think this all makes sense. The intent with my proposal is to put something on the table. I'm not asking anybody to vote on it today or for us to scope it out today, but that's what I'm recommending. And I'm going to send information for my proposal to convince you folks this is a great idea, but that won't happen right now.
Thank you, Stuart. I think that clarification helps in what you're proposing. So maybe what we can do, in addition to talk about some of the other ideas and then making sure we have time just to talk about, to Shad's point, the list of everything that's in the report, is as a follow-up, Stuart will pull together some of the information in relation to that pilot project that's worked and what could be, you know, potential other sites. We can review that ahead of the next meeting, then be able to post some questions, maybe even ahead of that through Slack, so that if anything, we could be prepared to, if not make a decision, but better understand what is all needed to move forward with that. How does that sound? Or something everyone's comfortable with? Kate, go ahead. Your hands up.
Yeah, as somebody who started out this meeting talking about equity, I can tell you that bike cages will not pass the equity lens. I'm very much in favor of them. I would love to see us support people riding their bikes to train stations. But if you look at the people who are parking their bikes at a bike cage, it will not pass the equity lens at this time. I just want you guys to know that.
Not necessarily. I've been working on one for DU, and there's a lot of people who are poor. And they all want to park their bikes.
And how
then they
many
wanna
of
park
them
their bikes
are,
elsewhere.
how many are women? How many are Black? How many are other? I get that. I'm, you know, I want to see it happen, but I think that if we are developing an equity platform, that this idea, which I'm totally in favor of, is going to have a hard time. Let me just say that, and then I'll shut up. Sorry.
And maybe that's something, Kate, to your point, and I see Alana's comment as well, we can dig into more. And you have insight on this particular project, but just dig into that piece more and where there could be changes in terms of approach that could make it more equitable, but just having that, again, that discussion before we make any formal recommendation. Aileen, was your hand going up?
Yeah, maybe maybe we just honestly use this example too as like a way to test out the process. It's a small sized recommendation, I'd say, and it's a good way for us to kind of test out some ideas that we've been talking about, consensus and equity, and we can talk about process, what we like about the process and what we don't like. It's a small enough conversation where if we end up and we kind of are mad at each other for a while, or we come to an impasse, you know, it's not the end of the world. But if we are able to, you know, get through the process, then we learned a little bit about the process and we know how to make ourselves feel better about these decisions. We've tested out a few things. So then we kind of achieve what Molly was talking about earlier without, so we kind of talk about process at the same time we can make some small, potentially, at least set ourselves up to potentially make some small moves and action that Stuart's kind of asking for. Does that make sense?
Just so you know, I'm not trying to be difficult today. I just wanted to force one issue for, I wanted to put something on the table. But I forewarned Naomi I would do this, so I'm not going to be difficult on all other issues. I just want to push it. Any other comments on this? Any other short-term items to just put on the table?
I think Chantel had something.
Yeah, I have a short-term item. Okay, so, and I also wanted to comment on the fleet electrification piece because we're talking about, I mean, this is really long-term, and not only with the funding coming in, but also planning it takes a lot of time. And our team is currently working with RTD on assessing their system for most suitable routes for fleet electrification. So if we want to get into that conversation later, we can look at it from the lens of operations too. Although I think that it would probably be helpful to talk about the potentially coming Colfax BRT in that conversation regardless, but that's not my short-term idea. My short-term idea is a little bit of a pivot and it's playful and it would take probably a lot of energy on my side, but it's regarding the new Meow Wolf installation that's coming to Denver. Is everybody here familiar with Meow Wolf? Okay, if you're not, it's a amazing, collaborative, interactive art experience. And they have one in Santa Fe, they have one in Las Vegas, and it draws in lots of people. The one that they opened in Las Vegas recently brought in over 200,000 people in the first 3 months. Okay, so this is going to be located at the intersection of 25 and West Colfax. So you think about that number of people, that's a lot of traffic and that's a lot of parking in the heart of downtown Denver. And so I was wondering, how can we mitigate some of that while pulling upon this lens of equity? And so I had this idea, what if we partnered with Meow Wolf, which also has a very strong commitment to partnering with the community. And we helped fund some of their artists to create bike lane wayfinding with our installations that connected some of the key points downtown. So connected to Rhino, which those people are probably going to go to anyways because of all the mural art, connect to Union Station so they can take transit, and then to further the lens of equity, connect them to minority-owned businesses in Globeville. And then to take it one level up and kind of go with Mike's enthusiasm for electric bikes, put some electric bike stations on that route and subsidize them for maybe members of Globeville or disadvantaged communities in the region so that they're all connected to this new economic boost that's going to be coming to the area. And I can go on, but I'll stop there.
I think it's a great issue, but I can hear Grace already saying, well, that's more marketing. I like the idea, but how can I prove that it reduces emissions? Is there anything out there that quantifies that benefit such that she can get the city attorney to agree with this? But it's an absolutely fabulous idea.
So Lyft has a new e-bike program going on in the city, so everybody knows. And as part of that, they have a low income program that is attached to that. So they would be exactly the people to partner in this kind of thing. And I think they would be willing to do that. And Eileen probably can put us right in connection with the right people to talk about that. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Great idea, Chantel. I'm in. The person who can't draw a stick person, I'm excited about this.
Mike, how do we proceed on this? It's a short term, it is definitely something that's coming up soon. What can we do as a committee?
I mean, I think just like starting to flesh out what the idea is, what the proposal actually is, what we are looking to actually, what piece we would be funding with that, what that role of CASR would be, or the CPF in that. And then I think if we, it's going to put that kind of proposal together and then have something concrete for this committee, we did want to put on the list to recommend up, then I think that would probably be the process in my eyes.
Yeah. I'm thinking out loud, and I didn't want to, that idea of like subcommittees of the subcommittee, I was trying to avoid because I know meetings are a lot, but we might need to maybe come to have a group that could help in fleshing out, okay, what is the build out of that implementation? What does that look like to bring back to this group for discussion and ultimate decision making? And I don't know what folks' thoughts are about that, because I want to make sure we're giving stuff the time needed and everyone has what they need before like saying, yes, we should move forward with this, but doing that in a way that we're still moving quickly. So I'll pause there and see what we'll think about that, and maybe having like a core group that has capacity, even though we help flesh some of that out and can bring in the equity questions and whatnot. So Chad, I saw you've gone off mute. So if you have any thoughts you have on that, or anyone else?
Well, I had one before your statement and one after your statement. The thought before your statement was, Mike, if there are templates that can help streamline this process of how we should be communicating this, that would be greatly appreciated, because it will just make it standard and we can reuse them for each of these. There will be many recommendations coming from this group. And then, Naomi, to your point, this is work. Somebody's got to put this down on paper and communicate it. So I don't see how you accomplish this without subcommittees. My only question, so I think, to me, that feels like an obvious, but this is a group and there are a lot of opinions, so we should definitely hear what others there are. But I would just ask, again, from an efficiency perspective, this is the operations guy talking, are there aspects that people are comfortable with and aspects that people are less comfortable with, like the finances for something? Or Mike, if there are in your template are different components that some people have more expertise around, let's bring that to light so that we can help work with each other and bring recommendations to life more effectively, more comprehensively.
Regarding this specific idea, it's not something that I'm working on, but it is something that other folks with Denver Streets Partnership are working on. And this, almost the exact thing you're talking about, might already be in the works. So I could get an update and share it via email, or I could connect interested folks with the right Denver Streets Partnership people who are working on this. if that's of interest.
That
I think if
really
this is
says
something we move forward
something.
with, it would take a few people, a few entities probably collaborating on it. So that'd be amazing.
It says something about the viability of the concept that Denver Streets Partners is already, and that we have come to this independently, says that it's probably a good idea.
Well, if there aren't any other comments, I want to move the agenda forward. And the next item is for Naomi. With looking at what the previous committee had offered as far as guidance.
Yeah, well, I just want to give everyone a brief overview for those that weren't intimately involved in following the task force process, just how the task force's recommendations came to fruition. And this, I'm going to go pretty quick through some slides I'm going to share, but just also welcome. There was a lot of folks in this group that were either consulted, attended the meetings, were a part of it as a community leader. So I want to welcome other spots as well. But I just want to kind of give everyone, here's how we got here in relation to, because as I understand it, our council and then these respective subcommittees, they existed under the previous office before it became CASR, but it was remodeled in a way to just kind of continue the work of the Climate Action Task Force, especially so that all these recommendations aren't just sitting on a website, they're actually something that's being acted on. So just to kind of bring some context around, why our group exists. So I'm going to just share my screen if you give me a moment. And then just based on where we are at time, I saw a lot of comments already. I'll put in the chat. What I pulled out was the phase 1 recommendations within the report. So that hopefully we get to start talking about that. But I think this could be even a space to where we work to prioritize where we want to focus. So let me present and then share my screen. Okay. So if you haven't read the task force's report, it is many, many pages. It is broken out into an executive summary, but also a full report. The recommendations focus specific to transportation, focus on 6 categories, as well as a section on land use and transportation. Those sections are making transit convenient, reliable, accessible, and affordable, reducing vehicle trips, reallocating our existing public space, increasing clean vehicle options, looking at how we can change behavior through new transportation options and incentive programs, and expanding and embracing innovative mobility options. Again, too, we had a lot of discussions as a task force around land use and how we would incorporate that into the overall task force's recommendations. So through a lot of discussion and also feedback from community, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that landed in the transportation section. So at the beginning of the report, after some kind of overarching, here's our goal, here are the co-benefits around transportation, we did outline land use recommendations that'll help in increasing our transportation options. The way it's broken out is just kind of overarching strategies and then specific tactics and action steps. So looking at what we can implement, what should the city evaluate, knowing a lot, especially around the funding mechanism. So with congestion pricing, for example, the city would need to study how they might implement that and figure out if there's any implications with state existing laws. So we didn't want to say, you need to implement congestion pricing in the next 2 years, but the city should make an effort to prioritize that, that as a particular tactic. We also noted too the consultation with regard to working with RTD, where there needs to be coordination with CDOT, where there might need to be passage of state legislation to enable the city to take action. We also noted too, we haven't talked about it in this group, but just funding and revenue sources that could align with implementing the policies or strategies in the report. So again, congestion pricing was something that came up. It's a way to raise revenue, but also reduce single occupancy vehicle trips. Again, the format is kind of an overview, why transportation is included in climate work. Again, we wanted to write this in a way where those that are really in this space can get into the details, but also for those that maybe aren't as intimately involved in climate work to understand why transportation was a big portion of the work we need to do to reduce overall emissions. The phasings listed before you. We started this work before the pandemic began, so we recognized even when we built this out, some of those phase 1 recommendations might not happen by 2022, but we wanted to sure that those were the things we thought could be acted on pretty quickly. And the framework, as you see before you, recommendations around what the city should implement, what the city should evaluate and how they might implement it, and what kind of consideration should be top of mind when looking at some of those tactics. So it sounds a little wonky right now, but you kind of see it as you read through the report. We also tried to break down as much as we could in that time frame the cost to implement, and we have worked with some really great consultants to help in putting some cost analysis together. Transportation, as many have mentioned, costs a lot, and the Climate Protection Fund is not going to be the only way that we can fund this work too. So that's why there was a section specific to funding recommendations. We also had citations too, just so people could understand where we get that information from. Big thing too, in a short time frame, we were able to do a good amount of community engagement, and we really tried to center our work in equity. So even looking at some of the funding questions around increasing parking costs and whatnot, we really tried to think about what are those equity considerations, especially for those that are of lower incomes that come downtown to work or come to other areas of Denver to work where parking could be a significant cost to them. So try to note that in the report. Again, we developed those buckets, resulting in those strategies, and really tried to flesh out those action steps in relation to the recommendations. It all started with the visioning session. We were all in a room and everyone just kind of put down every big idea that they had, everything they thought could work. And over the next couple months in our work, tried to really bucket those, which ultimately led to those 6 focus areas, and as well as the land use piece. We then put those out for community feedback, got a lot of feedback, good. Some were that pushed us in terms of having some more specific aspects around the big ideas that we had come together with. All of the stakeholders in the respective subcommittees went to their constituencies, so we'll have meetings in a box just to get people's feedback on these ideas. Again, continue to meet with subject matter experts from the various organizations you see before you, as well as others, to get their feedback on these ideas before they became finalized, and put these out for feedback from our own task force members. So a lot of folks came to one-on-one sessions or office hours to ask us questions and make sure that they understood what they were ultimately going to be voting on, which eventually the report came together. We presented it to the city council. The city council did not need to approve it. I don't believe they even endorsed it, if I'm remembering correctly, but the thought was, this is the guide for the city council to take action, or for the city generally to take action too. So now, we're in a great place too to really look at what are those key recommendations we want to make sure CASR is acting on within the next year. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I also welcome, there's a lot of people on this call that were involved in creating or commenting on these recommendations. So I'd welcome any thoughts or anything I missed about what ended up being a short process. Any thoughts or anything? Any clarifying points? Anyone have a chance to read that or the executive summary? If not, that's okay. I see some head nods. Thank you. Good job. Okay, well, that's what got us to today. So we have a quick. Oh, go ahead, Perry.
Give me a second to unmute. I think the summary was really great, and I can't underscore strongly enough how important it is to be familiar with that document. Not just the document, but the appendices. That there's some really good work on trends analysis in Denver climate. A lot of the more visionary, progressive ideas are embedded in some of those appendices, because there was a consensus building facilitation process that ended up with the report. I don't think they should be dismissed because they were ahead of their time, those ideas. So I feel like you did a great job. The task force did a great job. You did a great job just now, and it's a really good foundation for us to stand on.
Thanks, Perry. So, I mean, this isn't the only space we have to work off of, but it's a great starting point too. So what I put in the chat a little bit ago, we pretty much pulled out all the phase 1 recommendations for land use, and then those 6 specific buckets. I've seen there's been a lot of great comments already, and Lana and Mike were really helpful in kind of outlining where there's been work since this report came together last fall. So we have a good starting point to see either what's been completed in terms of a policy that's been enacted, where there's been some action, but not the full entirety of what's recommended. So, you know, I don't have a playbook for how we're going to go through this. I think just in this conversation we've had, we probably need to create, like, operationalize or create a process for assessment, but kind of welcome others' thoughts on just any initial reactions to these, or thoughts in general around how we might maybe operationalize this, or just any either even clarifying questions in relation to some of the things that are in there, if you have those.
One quick thought. It seems like some of the policy recommendations in particular could go onto our short-term action list. You know, maybe what we would do is go through an exercise to prioritize like 1 or 2 things we want to see the mayor or the council take up, and have the SAC issue a recommendation as a near-term thing we could do.
Yeah, to build on that, I think it'd be helpful to evaluate the policies and the opportunities for spending funds based on the impact that we think that they could have, and equity components and whatever other criteria we think is important. And then from that, just build a work plan of how to move forward on these things.
One of the things that struck me in reading through the list is that many of these goals are very grandiose. And if we adopted something like, we're going to promote our BRT, well, how can we actually do that? And certainly there's advocacy for it. There's studies that have been done, but even to start a BRT, it costs a minimum of $250 million, and we don't have that. So if you look at one area like the Spear First Leetsdale corridor that has a complete study on BRT, the issue isn't that there's anything we can do to make that change. At least that's my understanding, unless we want to start lobbying at the state and federal level. But you know, certainly we are supportive of it. But are there things that are realistic and reachable for us? And just because we don't do it doesn't mean someone else isn't doing it. So I don't know if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I keep gravitating towards the policy action items, because I think there's stuff that we can do there as a city that would increase the likelihood that, or the attractiveness of funding a BRT system in certain places. Like for example, I actually don't know what the city's policy on this is, but you know, I'm imagining generally cities have like a traffic impact study or a parking impact study that are required for building new developments. Maybe we could recommend the city change that process to be more about like an access measure, access to jobs and services, and adjust, you know, recommend that we adjust the zoning and the building permitting processes to increase access for folks to affordable housing, to jobs, to services, and also at the same time reduce emissions. And like that wouldn't cost any money, but it might drive some investment decisions from other players.
Now you're going to get me on my soapbox. That's a problem. So access to everything that we need, affordable housing, employment, to get out of food deserts, transportation is underneath all of that. That's why we are all here, because none of those things have any value if you can't get to them. And if we're trying to help people with transportation to access all of those things, then we need to look at who needs more transportation. It's certainly not a train to Boulder. Sorry, had to get that one in every time I can. But what is needed are more smaller circulators. And I know that City and County of Denver is working on a pilot project in Montbello right now. We should look at that and see how it falls into our goals and support that model. And then we have a pilot platform. I don't know if it's been brought to this committee at all, but it's a really great idea that's costing the leftover money from the Chariot project is what's being used to put that thing together. So those are the kind of things that we as a group need to look at, and we need to support not even the specific project, but the concepts that led to them. So again, I'm back to who needs, to the equity part of who needs it. And the fastest, here's my statement, I put it in there, the fastest growing population in Denver is older adults. Hopefully you are all going to be older adults one day if there's enough air left to breathe when you get there. So I think we as a group need to look at supporting things that are moving toward what we want. Did I say that right?
So can I make a recommendation for the beginning of our next discussion, or even in between, that we have, as mentioned before, a template for recommendations, and we have made some progress towards this recurring theme of measuring equity impact. However, I don't even care at this point if it's t-shirt sizing, low, medium, high, and we can further divide that. I recognize it's an extreme oversimplification, but like I keep hearing it and we need that. And we now have this great list. I read the summary, and thank you, Naomi, for sending it. I will read the rest of the 106-page full report this weekend, and hopefully that will give me some more fuel to move forward. But I also know that not all of the equity aspects will have been sized in a way that works, or that needs to be further developed. I think, to Stuart's point, we need to lock these things down so that we can start moving some of these things forward, and then go from there. So I feel like the very first part of our next discussion should be, here's our format for making these recommendations, a starter discussion of how we should be measuring or showing an equity impact, a quantifiable and a subjective. And then hopefully we can start moving some of these forward, because that's, I think, what I think what I'm hearing others are most passionate about doing.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I just want to add one element to kind of at the front end with the application, potential emission reductions. I know that's hard to quantify, but maybe it's just like that small, medium, high determination, or getting folks at the city to help us estimate.
Adrian?
Yeah, I agree with Chad's recommendation. I think that's a really great, good goal to have for the next meeting. And I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit more. So is it correct? Is my understanding correct in that we're identifying some short-term projects to fund quickly, and maybe those won't be funded through an RFP process, and then more on a longer term approach, there will be more of an RFP process to capture more projects, and we'll be figuring out how they tie into the criteria that we'll be developing starting with the next meeting. Is that correct?
That makes sense. I mean, ultimately, like I said in the last meeting, it'd be great to have 2 short terms, 2 long terms to focus on, but we got to kind of work through our criteria to make sure that's what we're doing. But the issue of having an RFP is not tied really to short term or not. When you get down to the nuts and bolts, and this is my blunt opinion, it diffuses some of the liability for the city in making grandiose decisions about where they place these things, like the e-bikes. They get the host organizations to submit an application, and then the host organization takes on that responsibility. And so it really is partly, how can we deliver this? Like the bike cages at the stations, ideally would just be a relationship between the city and RTD and get them done, figure out where they're equitable and what emission reductions that they bring. But again, we need to look at, who's going to own it, who's going to watch over it, who carries the liability for it, and things of that nature.
Joffrey, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Can we put together a matrix that would, for each one of these recommendations, that maybe I'm thinking of 3 off the top of my head, capacity reducing number of kind of right sizing our roadway network to reduce it's under reallocate public space. It's kind of repurposed travel lanes, but kind of reducing vehicle capacity, I think, is a big one. Reducing emissions, ability for the project to reduce emissions, and then cost or project cost. And then can we do like a low, medium, high, or just kind of very like, hey, it probably does well, or it's medium, or it's low for each of those. I know it's difficult to quantify any one of those with exactness. Is that, I mean, something along those lines where it's a little bit tough to kind of give it a low, medium, high just by reading each of the statement recommendations. Is that
I like that idea. Are there any individuals in this group that are very passionate or have expertise would like to help in kind of creating that ahead of our next meeting?
I would just contribute. I know it's probably, I'm sure it's not for all the recommendations. We definitely did some work, during the task force, looking at different stuff, trying to at least come up with, not like exact dollar figures, but order of magnitude kind of stuff, especially around costs and emissions reductions. So I will kind of dig back through and see, what, if any, data we might have as a city on some of these, that we can start building out the cost, emissions, maybe equity, kind of, seem like cost, emissions, and equity seem like three very big pieces of the matrix we want to be checking off. And I'll see what, if any, information we have on what we already have in the task force reports.
Yeah, I remember making a table with some of that information in it. I'm not sure, like the equity piece, I think if it's a little squishy, but the dollar figures I think are helpful.
So going back to Shad's recommendation on us filling out kind of like a form to put something on the table, we're not experts and we shouldn't feel restricted. And maybe these criteria could be at the bottom where we estimate low, medium, high. But once it's presented to the group, we have city staff to research certain things. Others who are expert on our committee can chime in and say, no, that's not a low emissions impact, that actually is high. And I think that would help all of us have something in writing in front of us to work from, instead of walking into a recommendation pretty too open to have a productive discussion that narrows it down to what is that criteria we use to select or not select. Is that okay, Mike? I mean, I kind of see you folks as kind of the research arm, not that you're going to have all the answers, but you could help us scope things out further after one of us puts together an application.
Yeah, and I like the idea of using the expertise of the group, because I mean, there's some people work in this every day, and they can say, yeah, no, I have a question mark. I don't know what the equity impact of this is, but someone in this group could very well be like, oh, I worked in a project exactly on that, and I can give you some great insight into why that's a medium equity. So I think using the expertise we have in this virtual room would be really fabulous, and like just kind of being collaborative in how we build out even this whole list of the matrix, but then how we build out the recommendations based on that matrix.
So once we once we create this application form, and I think that's what you were saying, Naomi, and kind of reaching out to the group, anybody have expertise. I saw Molly, you're already preparing a matrix of many of these. If you want to do that for the full group, that would be absolutely fabulous. Is there anybody who wants to take a stab at this application form, or are there multiple people so that we form a subcommittee to look into that?
Sure, I can start maybe taking just a first shot at that kind of recommendation template. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect, but I can put a first draft together and then share with people, and if people again have edits, thoughts, ways to make it better, trying to achieve that balance between exhaustive and simple. I think that'd be a great thing that we can try to work forward with the whole group. I can definitely start that off.
Chad?
Yeah, and just to hark back to your earlier point in the conversation, there are other committees. This can't be, we are not the only committee that has to make recommendations or is trying to figure out how to best communicate recommendations. So I'm just assuming that this may be a partially solved problem. just a thought. I do defer to Mike's judgment. He's probably best suited to know what questions we're going to need to answer or how best to communicate it. But also, I think that was the point. The other committees want to leverage best practices. Let's see if somebody beat us to the punch on this one. And of
That
course,
sounds-
modify the variables for the factors we're considering from like a transportation perspective.
This is great. Do you think that we can get people's comments between the meeting? Sometimes things like this are easier to address through, commenting online, and we all know the comments. So when we get to our meeting, we don't wordsmith. Okay, well, I'll coordinate with Naomi and Mike to see if we can do that. Would it be appropriate, do you think, that each of us eventually, once there is a forum and once we've had a chance to go through our 600 pages, that each of us could think about one idea short-term, one long-term? I put mine on the, no, I shoved mine down your throat earlier, but but there was a purpose to that. Do you think that would be appropriate moving forward?
I got a feedback on that. I'd like to see the form be shorter rather than longer for openers. And then there's no reason then at the bottom of it, you couldn't put short-term, long-term, intermediate, whatever, 3 lines and let everybody just add there. And then it would be really interesting to me to see what themes came up over and over if we then brought our individual submissions back to the group. That's all.
Great. I would just underscore, don't ever feel like you're going too deep into the weeds when you're looking at a recommendation. That's so much that's in the report is so high level, grandiose. It's hard to even identify actionable items. So if there's a small piece that's missing, think about that too. That would be very helpful. But that's pretty much what I had to say. Naomi, what do you think with our timeline? Are we able to get through?
Mike or Alana, is there anything related to city updates that you wanted to call out for the group?
I can certainly, we have on the agenda, I can talk through just quickly an update on the different transportation stuff if people are interested in that. So just very, very quickly, I wanted a higher level update on the entire climate protection fund. I don't have the most recent super data, but I do know that through the first 4 months of the year, it's a sales tax measure. So we've brought in just under $9 million in funding to the first 4 months. Now we have very smart people within our budget office who figure out, okay, the first 4 months of 2021 are going to look very different from a sales tax perspective than the last 8 months due to COVID and opening up and what that all means. So they have people who are very smart and do this for a living, trying to understand what the rest of the year is going to look like. So, just at a high level, we're kind of working off the assumption that over the course of 2021, we should have maybe at least $30 million total in CPF funding across all of the allowable uses, of which sustainable transportation is one of those allowable uses. So that's just kind of hopefully give you a little bit of context of where we're at today, where we think we're at. And I'll kind of keep on updating people as we get more information and more data on where we're at. So, really quickly, right now, with the sustainable transportation projects, I think I mentioned on some of these meetings, we've come up with probably about $1 million worth of projects that were either already under contract on or are in an RFP process or are in that process right now. So we have the e-bike libraries, which we have about $200,000 worth of contracts for the 2 e-bike libraries for essential workers. We had an e-bike delivery pilot project RFP that recently closed. We are moving forward, hopefully, fingers crossed, with contracting with 3 groups who put in proposals that have been tentatively accepted. We're going through contracting process. That's another about just over $400,000 worth of funding. The project Kate was talking about, we are supporting the expansion of a microtransit project in Montbello neighborhood, in the Montbello neighborhood. So our office, CPF funding, is adding an additional electric vehicle to that service to expand the service, make it cleaner. So that's another about $150,000. We're partnering with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure on that. And then finally, we have another RFP strictly focused on electrified mobility in the Montbello neighborhood again. So separate from the microtransit project, that RFP just closed and we're reviewing proposals right now. So all together, if you add all those dollar figures up, it comes to about $1 million in kind of what it's been under the sustainable transportation umbrella so far. So there's other RFPs that are kind of building up and working on already, but we definitely have more funding that we can spend in 2021 if we can identify some quick wins, easy things to do. Very happy to do that. But that's kind of the update. I can go into more detail or whatever if people have questions, but I know we're very close to time. I don't know if Alana had anything she wanted to share. Saw her shake her head. So.
No, I don't. Thanks, Mike.
If there aren't any questions, I'm going to turn it to Shad to give your comment on the process, because I think just to see if we're all on the same page. My idea in having everybody eventually come up with one idea was so that we as a group could prioritize. But you're suggesting more of a group exercise. So I just wanted to give you a minute to bring that up and make that comment.
Yeah, there are idea factories and there are engines, and I know I am an engine, so I'm not likely to be the one to bring the innovative idea. I love reading about all of them, but I think this group, among several of us, probably have really great ideas. Let's get those to the forefront and fleshed out. And where it comes to trying to figure out, hey, I know this is the idea, but we need help with either the cost estimates or some of the operational aspects, like bring in the other expertise that's where someone like me would be more comfortable playing. So that's just my reaction, is like, give me ideas to help build out, and I can help 5 ideas move forward versus trying to come up with one that may or may not be worth even discussing, frankly, because there are so many already. That's my initial reaction.
That's great. I'll be your partner, Shad, because I'm the idea person who is then lost for how to make it happen.
Maybe what we could do, since we're close on time, is send out like a survey and ask folks, where do you feel like you fit, your expertise fits? Is it operationalizing this process, bringing the ideas, engaging community and feedback as a next step? And then we can create those kind of subgroups to do work outside of the space. Folks are comfortable with that? See nods, a thumbs up with the baby. Hi. Okay. Awesome. One last thing we might survey as well, knowing that things could change at any time, but if there is an opportunity to either meet in a hybrid model, or if folks are comfortable meeting in person, we want to get your all's feedback on that. So maybe we'll do a survey on that as well. So just look out for that. I think, yeah, we're at time. I don't have anything else. Thank you all for your engagement. We're truly building the bike as we're riding it. So I appreciate everyone's just thoughtfulness and willingness to do the work. So Stuart, do you have anything you want to close with as well?
Great meeting. I found it very productive. Thank you everyone for participating. If you have any concerns about how Naomi and I are setting up agendas or the process or anything, feel free to send that to us. It is really your committee and we're just facilitators. So please let us know about the process and the content, and hopefully we'll do a little work between the meetings with Slack or individually.
Stuart just wants a parking lot for the bicycle that we're building.
What's that?
And you want a parking cage for the bicycle that we're building.
Yes. Yes, that's it. Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.